All right, car enthusiasts, here's a question. What's the ultimate Ford muscle car ever built? Is it the high-tech beast of today or one of those tire-shredding classics that left their mark on history? Here's the list of the top 10 Ford muscle cars of all times, from the ones that ruled the drag strips to the legends that dominated the streets and pop culture. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll be dying to know which one takes the crown. First up, let's kick things off with some modern muscle that's redefining speed and power. The 2020 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. Now, this isn't just a car, it's a supercar killer disguised as a muscle car. A 5.2-liter supercharged V8 churning out an earth-shattering 760 horsepower. That's right, this beast delivers more power than many exotics on the market. 0 to 60, try 3.3 seconds. That's blink and you miss it speed. And the quarter mile, it's about 10.7 seconds. You blasted past 130 miles an hour. The Shelby GT500 isn't just fast, it's brutal. There's more to this than timed runs and higher average velocity, however. It gets a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission that is just as fast as the blink of an eye. And this is among the best Mustangs ever made. It's not that Ford's engineers simply dump power, they fashion it into performance. Technology-wise, the car features adaptive suspension system, bigger brakes, and aerodynamic features meant for track use, making this car a beast on the road and on the track. Now, if you're into the Dodge Hellcat, then this is the Ford that runs those 700 horsepower cats up the wall. In GT500, Ford took the competition a little too literally and decided to soak in the fun instead. To this day, it's the peak of contemporary bruiser. Ford's pony car that can hang or outperform today's supercars. Do you think that the GT500 is superior to a Hellcat? Leave your answer in the comments below. Now, let's roll back the clock a little and go through one of the most beloved Ford muscle cars ever produced, the 1969 Mustang Boss 429. For any real muscle car enthusiast, I'm sure you get that quick flutter in your stomach when you see this car. It was no ordinary Mustang by any standard, but more of a glorious custom-made product. It was a street-legal NASCAR for homologation and had the specific purpose of putting Ford's 429 cubic-inch V8 into high-speed racing. In theory, on paper, it should have produced 375 horsepower, although many expect that the true figure was less of an enrichment. Actually, Chrysler was releasing close to 525 horsepower in the X-Speed version of the Boss 429. Ever wonder why the 1969 Boss 429 was a nightmare for competitors on the racetrack? The secret isn't just in the engine. We'll reveal what makes this classic a speed demon shortly. This car might seem like it was all about the engine. The massive 7.0-liter V8 was hand-built and designed for high revving power, perfect for NASCAR tracks. And sure, it wasn't the quickest off the line with a 0 to 60 time of 5.3 seconds, but that wasn't its game. The Boss 429 was built to be driven at high speeds. With a top speed that could hit 150 miles an hour, it was a cruise missile in the disguise of a Mustang. What made it even more special? Only 859 were made, and if you like and watch action movies, then you definitely noticed the car in the movie John Wick, the main character Keanu Reeves riding a thug in a black Boss 429. It's the muscle car that defines peak awesomeness, the perfect car for an all-out tough guy. Want one? Then you better be ready to pay at least 6 figures to own this muscle car legend. Now, almost 99% of the car guys must be thinking that the Boss 429 was the real deal back in the early 70s, but here comes the twist. A car that never made the streets, but is really worth a mention. Did you know there was actually a Ford muscle car that was so powerful it was deemed too dangerous for the streets and never released? Yep, that's right. Back in the 70s, Ford secretly tested a prototype called the Ford Boss Super Snake, which packed over 600 horsepower. Legend has it that during a test run, it almost went airborne due to the insane power and lightweight frame. Ford engineers called it quits on production, realizing it was simply too wild to handle. So while it never officially made the list, the Super Snake remains a legendary ghost car that could have changed the game. Did this surprise you, or are you in that 1% of car geeks who knew about it? Tell us in the comments. Now, let's end the pit stop and go back to our main list. Moving up next, we have Ford's 1969 Torino Talladega, a name that speaks for itself. NASCAR was the destined home for the Torino Talladega, which was truly a car ahead of its time. And during the time of aero wars, when aerodynamics outweighed the racetrack, Ford planned to build a car capable of outdoing the Dodge Charger Daytona. The result? You guessed it right, the Torino Talladega, which was designed with a reference to the Talladega Superspeedway. It had one of the most powerful manufacturing plant motors ever produced, the 428 Cobra Jet V8. With on paper a horsepower around 335 but close to 400 in real-world conditions, the Talladega could leave opponents eating its dust. Not to mention the fiery speed of 135 miles an hour, which smoked the crap out of the streets. This car was not representing just speed, it was representing winning. This unusually streamlined front end gave Ford better aerodynamics than anything else on the NASCAR circuit. It was conceptualized in 1969, and by the end of the year, the car won the championship. Not only did this car go fast, but it went beyond that and conquered. While the Talladega is one of the legends on the track, chances of getting one today are as hard as trying to locate a needle in a haystack. Ford only built a 754, thus turning it into one of the most sought-after and valuable muscle cars ever to have been made. So, argue about it as much as you want, but Talladega was once every racer's dream. But let's go back to where it all started, the car that kicked off Ford's muscle car domination, the 1965 Mustang GT. When you think of Mustang, you probably picture this one. While the Mustang was initially a pony car, Ford turned it into a performance machine with a GT badge. The GT came equipped with a 289 cubic inch V8, producing 271 horsepower, enough to launch it from 0 to 60 in about 6.5 seconds. But performance wasn't the only thing that made the Mustang GT a legend. What was it about the 1965 Mustang GT that not only made it a muscle car icon, but also a pop culture phenomenon? There's one specific reason that made this car legendary. Stay tuned to find out. It's the car that defined American culture. It was like a cult among young people, particularly after the cinematic icon Steve McQueen gave it the Bond treatment in the car chase of Bullitt. This GT wasn't just about power and acceleration from 0 to 60. It had the look, image, and attitude. The 65 Mustang GT, even today, is one of the best ever built muscle cars to feel on the road. If you're lucky enough to own one of these, then you aren't just a car owner, you're a part of Americana. Now, we have another car that was born to race. Let's turn our attention to the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. This car's been famous for drag racing before it was made to leave the assembly line. Ford produced a series of 100 Thunderbolts, but each one of these limited beasts was a strip monster. Standard power for the car was a mammoth 427 cubic inch V8 that put out about 425 horsepower. But like many muscle cars of this era, it's believed that the actual output was far higher. The Thunderbolt's true claim to fame was its quarter-mile time, with a 0 to 60 time of 4.3 seconds and the ability to tear down the quarter mile in 11.6. It left the competition in the dust. This wasn't just a fast car, it was a drag racing machine. Lightweight, stripped down, and ridiculously powerful, the Thunderbolt was a factory-made dragster that could be driven on the street. Today, it's a legend, and if you own one, you've got one of the most desired muscle cars of all time. On the other side of the scale, you see 1963 Ford Galaxie's 500 XL, produced specifically to offer a counterpoint to muscle cars. Now, the Galaxie 500 XL was the gentleman's muscle car. It may look more like a Mach 1 that was built for the streets, but the gentleman's race car had Ford's legendary 427 V8, which produced 425 horsepower. The Galaxie was one of the largest and toughest cars to get made in the 50s and 60s, and despite its sheer size, it could sprint from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. This car could reach out to over 140 miles an hour with two variants unthinkable in the content of a luxury cruiser. It had class and muscle, and the name Galaxie, spelled with an E, was indeed synonymous with class. Whether you were driving gracefully in the boulevard or spinning the wheels off the line, this car attracted attention. And of course, this was the car that contributed to making Ford a serious player in the realm of performance automobiles back in the 60s. If you wanted to go fast, but luxury and class were also major factors you cared about, then the Galaxie 500 XL was your car. Now, let's jump to the future, or at least a modern take on a classic, the 2019 Ford Mustang Bullitt. Ford nailed it when they decided to revive the legendary Bullitt name. This car was built as a tribute to Steve McQueen's famous ride in Bullitt, but it was far from just a cosmetic upgrade. Under the hood, it packed a 5.0-liter V8 with 40 horsepower and could do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds flat and had a top speed of over 160 miles an hour. However, what made this model the Bullitt was not its performance designs. It was the dark Highland green body paint, the discreet badging, then blacked out wheels. Even at first glance, it appeared far more modern, but still just as badass as McQueen's original, with all the options you could ever want in a muscle car. With fabulous looks and the new generation performance, the 2019 Bullitt should be your choice if you ever dreamt of chasing through the streets of San Francisco like McQueen. Now, if you're looking for a no-nonsense, stripped-down race car for the street, the 2000 Ford SVT Cobra R is your answer. Ford only built about 300 of these beasts, and they were designed for serious track performance. Stripped down to its bare essentials, the SVT Cobra R wasn't just your average Mustang. Want to know what Ford had to compromise to turn this car into a street-legal track monster? The SVT Cobra R came with a 5.4-liter V8, pumping out 385 horsepower, but that's just the start. Ford removed the back seats, air conditioning, and anything else that wasn't needed for performance. It was a purpose-built, street-legal race car that could hit 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds and rip through the quarter mile in 12.9. Down to number 2, we have to talk about one of the most underrated but incredible Mustangs of all time, the 1971 Ford Mustang Mach 1. Under the hood, the Mach 1 packed a 429 cubic inch V8 with 375 horsepower ready to rock the streets. While it wasn't as fast as some of the more modern Mustangs with a 0 to 60 time of 5.7 seconds, it had a killer mix of style, power, and handling that made it a fan favorite. You might recognize it from James Bond's Diamonds Are Forever, where it stole the show in a high-speed car chase through Las Vegas. To round out our list, we can't forget the legendary 1987 Ford Mustang GT. This car is significant for leading the way in the modern era of muscle with its iconic fox body design. Under the hood, it boasted a 5.0-liter V8 engine that produced 225 horsepower and 290 pound-foot of torque. The 0 to 60 time was around 6.2 seconds, and it could complete the quarter mile in approximately 14.5 seconds. What made the '87 Mustang GT truly special was its return to performance after a decade of the oil crisis and stricter emissions regulations. It featured a lightweight body, refined aerodynamics, and a more modern suspension setup, allowing it to corner better than many of its predecessors. But the Mustang GT didn't just shine on the streets. It made a lasting impact on pop culture. It was featured prominently in the 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where it became an instant classic. Today, the Mustang GT remains a favorite among enthusiasts for its blend of performance, style, and affordability, showing the spirit of American muscle at its finest. So, after this wild ride through Ford's muscle car legacy, which one stands out to you? The supercharged fury of the GT500? Or maybe the raw mechanical aggression of the Thunderbolt? Let us know in the comments which Ford muscle car is your all-time favorite, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more horsepower-packed content.